be recorded and streamed live via YouTube. This recording will be made available for public viewing after the event. Tonight's meeting, this afternoon's meeting, is a joint meeting with the Board of Health. Colorado statute requires that the Commission and the State Board of Health hold a joint public hearing during the month of October of each year in order to hear public comment on air pollution issues. Public comment will begin today at about 5 p.m. instead of our regular 4:30. The Commission will offer 3 minutes for each commenter. We have a quorum of commissioners here today, and I'm trying to 1, 2, 6. There are 7 of us. Good team. We have Commissioner Curtis Reeder, myself, Gary Arnold, Dan Blankenship, Commissioner Bill Gonzalez, Commissioner Jana Milford, and Commissioner Martha Rudolph. As I said, we're also joined by the Board of Health. I would ask that members that are here to introduce themselves and give a brief overview of their area of interest and your expertise and where you're from. And if it's all right, I would like for you to begin with Vice President Dr. Christina Su. And then maybe Dr. Su, you could call on your other members because I don't know where they are on this screen. And thank you.
Yeah, certainly. Thank you so much, Commissioner. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Christina Sa. I'm a member of the State Board of Health. I'm representing CD6. For me personally, I'm a pediatrician, general pediatrician by training, and so kind of joined the Board of Health with a perspective around primary care, preventative health, also a special interest in the social determinants of health. So happy to be here. I know that others were planning on joining today. I am not seeing anyone. Yep, no one is here yet, but I'll go ahead and kind of run through the other members of the State Board of Health, and hopefully we'll get a few more joining us this evening. So other members of the State Board of Health include Dr. Evelyn Barreo, who's representing Congressional District 2, Mayor Guyleen Castriata, Mayor of Broomfield, representing Congressional District 7, Deputy Mayor Al Gardner, who represents CD1, Dr. Daniel Pastula, who is one of our at-large members, also Mr. Stan Vanderwerth, who is representing CD5, and also our president, Tom Butts, who is representing CD8. So happy to be here.
Thank you. We're going to start on our regular agenda, and item number 1 on that is our Air Quality Control Commission annual report to the public. The Commission has reviewed the final draft of the annual report to the public and will vote to approve said report and for publication and distribution. Our Administrator, Jeremy Murray, will guide us through that, please. Jeremy?
Thank you, Commissioner Slutsky. I will get started here. First of all, I wanted to thank the commissioners for your review of the annual report. I wanted to highlight that you all voted on a cover photo for that. The winner of that was Matthew Twyman, and this is the cover photo here on this title slide. Great photo of the Red Feather area. And then I also wanted to thank the division staff for all the work they put into this report. In particular, I wanted to highlight Rick Coffin and CV Melarango from the division and all the work they did to compile all the data from all the various programs in the division and put it into the final format, and also take you all's feedback, make sure that that got included in the final draft. Right, and then I'm going to highlight just a few of this commission's actions over the last year everything you've done to improve air quality and public health in the state of Colorado. Starting with some work you all did on greenhouse gases. In October of last year, you all adopted some revisions to Regulation 22 to align our state reporting requirements with federal requirements. We also expanded the GHG emission reporting requirements to new sources throughout the state. In November, you all adopted a resolution to ensure that our GHG reduction goals are being met. In December of last year, you also adopted a first of its kind rule aimed at reducing GHG emissions from midstream oil and gas operations. I know that was a huge rulemaking and a lot of effort went into that, and it will have great benefits for the state. In February of this year, you all adopted more oil and gas regulations, including a phase out of pneumatic controllers in the non-attainment area in Reg 7. You did a lot of work on greenhouse gases. It took 2 slides here. So the division also released their greenhouse gas credit and tracking system. This allows folks to look at AQCC's Reg 22 and Reg 27 sources. And in June of this year, the division released its greenhouse gas emission and energy management for manufacturing, also known as GEM Data Explorer. And this shows GHG emission data for all facilities regulated under our GEM 1 and GEM 2 rules. You all also adopted some important regulations for transportation emissions in January of this year, including 2 key updates for the state vehicle emissions testing program and Regs 11 and 12. So the commission introduced self-serving kiosks for gasoline-powered hybrid vehicles that are open 24 hours every day. And you also adopted stricter emission compliance requirements for diesel-powered vehicles. And a lot of your work over the last year has been around air toxics. In January, you adopted the new Regulation 30, which identified 5 priority toxic air contaminants. In April, you adopted revisions to Reg 3 and 7 to enhance that reporting in Colorado of toxic air pollutants, and that included a list of 340 identified air toxic pollutants. And in last month's meeting, which I missed, I heard you all did a great job though, and had a successful meeting. You established chronic health protective benchmarks for those 5 priority air toxic contaminants. Those benchmarks will now go to the General Assembly for approval. And there's more work to come on air toxics, as you all know, next year. I just want to highlight a couple of additional efforts that the commission and division have undertaken. Last year in December, you all updated the procedural rules that affect all of our rulemakings going forward after August of this year. And those rules, we hope, will achieve several goals, including making our rules more readable, and in particular, the procedural rule itself, and enhancing the communication between all of our rulemaking parties and allowing more opportunities for public engagement. I also wanted to highlight that the division is continuing their work to improve public access to our data. So that includes the work they've done on the Environmental Justice Summary Dashboard. So this lets folks from the community see where new permits are being applied for in their zip code. And then there's also the inspections data visualization tool, which allows anybody in the state to see all of our completed air inspections across Colorado and get the data on those. So I think these are really important efforts that are ongoing and hopefully will build a foundation for public access to data in the future. And with that, I just want to thank you, commissioners, for your time and effort on the commission and all the work you do for Colorado and improving our public health and making sure we meet our wildly important goals. And I will turn it back over to you, Commissioner Slutsky, for a vote to approve this annual report to the public and publish it on our website.
Okay, well, thank you, Jeremy. Commissioners, are there any questions for Jeremy. Well, if not, I would like to have a motion to approve the 2024-2025 annual report to the public. We have a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
Second.
And a second. Thank you, Commissioner Thomas and Commissioner Reeder. Again, any discussions?
So, John,
Go ahead.
I did want to speak briefly, simply to thank the staff for all their work on this, and Jeremy and Jenny for all their work on this. But also, the photos were all fabulous. The 6 or 7 photos were like, wow. It was really hard choosing between them, and whichever one we picked was going to be great. But I was really impressed with the talented the division staff showing their talents in another arena in terms of all the photos.
Anyone else? All right, well, let us vote. All in favor?
Aye.
You opposed? Well, the motion passes, and thank you all for that. And again, thank you to the division. We're going to item number 2, which is a review of our 2025 ozone season. The division and the Regional Air Quality Council will present the 2025 ozone monitoring data with a meteorological review of the summer and report on the state's progress towards attaining the federal ozone standards, as well as the initiatives to reduce ozone-causing emissions. We have Scott Landis, William Vickers, and Mike Silverstein here to present. So I'm not sure who's starting off, but one of you guys.
Thank you, Commissioner Slutsky. I'm going to get it started off.
Thank you.
We have some slides to present.
Is everybody able to see that? I'll just get to the slideshow here.
Yep, it's visible, Scott.
Okay.
So, thanks again and good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Will Vickers. I'm the lead data analyst with the Technical Services Program of the Air Pollution Control Division. And I'm joined today by my colleague, Scott Landis, our lead air quality meteorologist. And today I'll provide a brief overview of ozone levels across Colorado during the 2025 summer ozone season, show where we stand relative to the federal standards and what this year's data tells us about the long-term picture. Then I'll hand it over to Scott, and he's going to discuss the meteorology that shaped this year's ozone patterns. You can advance to the next slide, Scott. So before I get into showing the data, I wanted to discuss just the basics of the federal ozone standards, or the National Ambient Air Quality Standards, the NAQS. So these are based on the daily maximum 8-hour ozone concentration. So if you can imagine, each day has a daily maximum concentration. And if you were to sort those 365 days from highest to lowest, the design value for the year would be the 4th highest. So we call that the annual 4th max. And then the official design value that we compare to the NAQS is the 3-year average of those 4th highest annual numbers. So right now, EPA enforces the 2015 standard of 70 parts per billion, with an older 2008 standard of 75 parts per billion that is still shown here for context. Next slide, please. So just some basics on ozone formation and behavior. One important thing to understand is that unlike most air pollutants, ozone isn't directly emitted into the atmosphere. It forms in the atmosphere when nitrogen oxides and volatile organic compounds, ozone precursors, react in sunlight. So it's mainly a summertime phenomenon. Not to say that it doesn't also occur in winter. There's also ozone in the atmosphere during winter, but the high concentrations that are concerning from a public health standpoint typically occur during the summer and are generally worse at higher temperatures. So sources of precursors include vehicles, industry, oil and gas extraction, as well as natural emissions from vegetation and wildfires. But to say that we know what the sources of emissions isn't to imply that it's a simple system. Ozone behaves as a complex, non-linear, and over-determined system. And I want to walk through what I mean by that. It's complex because emissions, chemistry, and meteorology are constantly interacting. It's non-linear in the sense that the same change in emissions can either raise or lower ozone depending on climate variability and background conditions. And it's over-determined in the sense that there's never a single cause of a good or bad year or a good or bad day. There's many different combinations of factors that can produce the same outcome. So, for example, a wildfire can both generate precursors and temporarily suppress ozone through shading. And even primary emissions of precursors can act as both a source of ozone and a sink, meaning that precursors can actually react with ozone and remove it from the atmosphere, thereby decreasing the concentration. So when we look across decades, the precursor emissions have declined significantly through cleaner engines, fuels, industrial controls, yet the ozone trend itself has remained essentially flat, oscillating year to year around a baseline that hasn't shifted much since the 1980s, 1990s. Because the system is so sensitive and interconnected, it's always possible to reach for an explanation that seems to explain a good or a bad year. But we want to avoid trying to create tidy explanations for outcomes that are mostly driven by these complex and nonlinear processes that aren't fully understood. That's why we interpret 1 year's results cautiously in the broader context of long-term variability and regional climate patterns. Slide, please. So here's where our monitoring sites are located across the state. And I'm going to move real quickly through this slide. Just note the broad coverage from the western slope to the eastern plains, but the concentration of sites in the Front Range, particularly in the Denver metro area, but also in Fort Collins and Colorado Springs. We also have a new site in Pueblo, a relatively new site. There are also quite a few sites in the southwest corner. One is operated by us, that's the Cortez site. One is operated by the National Park Service, and the rest are operated by the tribes. Then we have 2 sites on the western slope, the Palisade and Rifle sites. Slide, please. So now I'm going to get into showing the data. This, as you can see, isn't just data for this year, but it's data for the last 20 plus years. And what we're seeing here, and this plot the format will stay the same for the next several slides. Each line represents an individual monitoring site. And the points show the 3-year average, like I said, of the 4th highest daily 8-hour max. The metric used for the federal standard. So the dashed red line, the lower one, marks the 70 ppb standard. And you can see here in the southwest, every site's comfortably below that line. No upward movement and no concern here. Everything well below the federal standard. Next slide, please. And again, for some sites on the western slope, both the 2 sites that are still there today, but also some sites that have existed there historically. Sites in this region remain well below the standard as well and have been stable for several years. So overall, ozone isn't a problem in the western slope. in the Southwest region. It's more of a regional one, as you'll see as we advance to the next slide. So here we have our 2 sites in the Colorado Springs area. These sites have historically exceeded the federal standard of 70 ppb. You can see today for 2025, because of a relatively mild year, a mild summer and low ozone concentrations during 2025, the U.S. Air Force Academy site has dipped down below the standard and is currently in compliance, whereas the Manitou Springs site sits at 73 ppb design value, so exceeding the next. And also note that the Pueblo site is currently just below the standard. It only has 3 years of data, so imagine a point sitting right on top of the U.S. Air Force Academy point for 2025. So close enough that we need to keep a careful eye on it, but as I said, below the next. Next slide, please. So here's the data for the Northern Front Range, and this is where the real challenge lies. Nearly every site along the Northern Front Range remains out of compliance. So these are regions where population growth, transportation, oil and gas activity converge, and where meteorology tends to trap pollutants along the foothills. And while we see fluctuations from year to year, the long-term pattern kind of stays stubbornly above that 70 ppb line. And again, this is a clear reminder that ozone doesn't respond in a simple linear way to emissions controls. It's part of that complex, nonlinear, overdetermined system that I discussed earlier. So while a good year is always welcome, and as you can see, due to the good year, some of these design values are trending downward for 2025, and that's a good thing. However, I'd reiterate that we should be cautious about making any assumptions that we've turned the corner here. This is an ongoing problem. And even in background sites like Rocky Mountain National Park that are quite removed from the major urban areas, we still see ozone levels exceeding the NAAQS even there. Next slide, please. And so to summarize, this map is just kind of the same map that I showed at the beginning, but instead of just points, we're seeing what the design value is. So the green points are below both standards. The orange points are kind of in between the 70 and 75 ppb standards. And these red points, mostly in the Jefferson County area, are our highest sites, which exceed 75 ppb as a 3-year average of the design value. And you can see from the map, ozone in Colorado is mostly a front range issue. Levels elsewhere are comfortably within the standards, but the front range continues to struggle with persistent exceedances. And the key takeaway again is that the system's complex and nonlinear, and there's multiple interacting factors: local emissions, regional transport, meteorology, interannual climate variability, and these factors shape what we measure each year. And despite major reductions in precursor emissions over the decades, the ozone baseline's not moved much, suggesting that progress is going to come from sustained multi-sector long-term strategies. It's a complex problem, and it's something we expect to continue to deal with for the years to come. So with that overview, I'll hand it over to Scott, and he'll walk through the meteorological side of this summer's ozone season. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Will. Thank you, commissioners, Board of Health members, Really a pleasure to be here. Again, my name is Scott Landis. I supervise the meteorology and prescribed fire unit at the division. And my group is kind of in charge of issuing air quality forecasts and advisories for the entire state. But that also obviously includes the action day alerts, the ozone action day alerts that we have to issue quite a few of usually during the summertime months. So I'm going to break down this past summer. As Will said, it was a quote good summer. As far as ozone is concerned, we'll take that when we can get it. But I want to break it down a little bit and try to find some clues as to exactly why ozone was a bit lower this year than we've seen in previous years. So we'll kick it off with June. Traditionally, June 1st is the start of the ozone season here. And in June, I guess I should talk a little bit about what these graphs are. I do present these same graphs almost every year for this presentation, but they can be a little bit slippery. So let me talk a little bit about that. The big focus on the temperature graph that's on the left are the blue bars. Okay, so, and I really want you to focus on the top of those blue bars because that represents the maximum temperature for each day of the month in June. Now, the brown shaded area are the norms for that time of year. So if you see a blue bar extend up and above that brown shaded zone, that represents an afternoon temperature above the normal for that specific day. So we are, looking for that. We're looking for where those blue bars are and how they fall on this graph. And you can see there's a fairly even distribution of days where we were above normal as far as temperatures are concerned, but there were plenty that were below, and there were a lot that were way below average in June. So when we sum all this up, the 30 days in June, the average afternoon maximum temperature was about 2 degrees Fahrenheit cooler than what we've seen over the 16-year mean, 2010 to 2025. So in general, June was a pretty cool June. As far as precipitation is concerned, again, with this graph, we're going to be looking at the green line. That's going to represent the accumulation of precipitation day by day during the month of June. The brown line is the normal. Okay, so you can see the green line above the brown line, that means precipitation above normal for the month of June. But there is one thing I do want to note here. It was a wet June, but a lot of that precipitation fell in the first 4 or 5 days of June. Okay, so we had almost 2 inches of rain just in the first 4 or 5 days of June, and then added just a little bit to that as we continued through the month. So yes, it was a wetter than normal June, but a lot of it fell in the early days of the month when ozone is typically lower. For the next slide here, why is this not advancing? Okay, there we go. So when June was all wrapped up, this is the number of ozone action day alerts that we issued. Now, in contrast to last year, June was very atypical. It was very hot, very dry, and we issued a record number of ozone action day alerts last June, 15 of those. This year, much fewer, only 9 ozone action day alerts during the month of June, which is a bit lower than we usually see. And there were 6 days in June when there was actually an ozone exceedance of the 2015 standard. Also to be noted here, there were no significant wildfire smoke episodes or stratospheric intrusions during the month of June. So we move into July, and now as we head into July, we're starting to head into the heart of ozone season. By the time you hit the mid to late part of July, we're starting to see some of our highest ozone concentrations typically during the course of the year. So again, we're looking at these blue bars on the July graph here, and we're seeing a lot of those where we're above the average, but again, also plenty below it. So July was pretty typical as far as Julys are concerned in regards to temperature. It was pretty normal for what we generally see in July. And for precipitation, it was below average. In fact, after July 1st, there was virtually no precipitation. So we had about almost half an inch of rain on July 1st, and then really nothing for the rest of the month. All right, so July, we're getting back more into that regime of hot and dry conditions compared to what we saw in June. In addition to that, as is typical in July, we started to see an increase in wildfire activity. Four Corners region, by the early to mid part of the month, we started to see more in the way of wildfires in New Mexico, Arizona, and Utah, and eventually into the southwestern corner of the state. So the left side of this slide, you can see a satellite image from the afternoon of July 11th. And there were plenty of wildfires that had broken out across the southwestern corner of the state. That smoke was transported to the northeast overnight July 11th into the morning of July 12th. And you can see the morning skyline here in Denver on July 12th. Plenty of smoke around, and we did have an ozone exceedance the afternoon of July 12th. This is a comparison of July 2024 versus July of 2025. Now, for those of you that remember July of 2024, it got very smoky, very hot, and very dry, especially towards the latter part of the month. So if we compare 2024, which is the blue line, and the gray line, which is 2025, you can see for the first half of the month, yes, 2024 was higher than 2025, but not dramatically so. But there was definitely a shift as we got into the middle and especially late part of the month. 2024 was much, much worse than 2025. In fact, for some of those days, we're talking about a 30 ppb difference. And again, 2024 was really bad, especially with the timing of the wildfire smoke hitting the Front Range. A lot of the smoke hit late July, early August, and that is typically the worst time of year for ozone, minus smoke, just from anthropogenic emissions, the heat, the dryness. So late July is already a bad time of the year for ozone. Add wildfire smoke to the mix and it's even worse. So you can see there was a really big disparity between 2024 and 2025 for the late part of July. And I should note this is at Chatfield State Park, which is, of course, one of the higher monitors here in the Denver metro area. So let's move into August. August, at least the beginning of the month and into the middle part of August, it was pretty hot and it was also fairly dry as well. However, there was a big, big shift as we got into the latter half of the month. And one of the reasons for that, the monsoonal rains really hit the Denver Northern Front Range area as we got into the later part of August, which is welcome news when we're trying to keep ozone down. So when we take August as a whole, it was about 1.5 degrees Fahrenheit cooler than the 16-year mean, but that number was really driven by the cool and wet weather that we saw in the latter half of the month of August. So when all is said and done, the total number of ozone action day alerts that we issued in 2025, it's the lowest that we've had to issue since the standard changed in late 2015. So that's really a good piece of news. We only had to issue 30 ozone action day alerts this past summer compared to 52 the summer before. So really a market improvement there. Now, the numbers that Will shows are obviously the very important numbers from a regulatory sense. We're looking at the fourth max of the 3-year average. That drives, are we attaining the NAAQS or not? But it always is good to kind of look a little deeper at the numbers. So with this graph on the right-hand side, it's plotting the average daily maximum 8-hour average ozone concentration at NREL and the average 500 millibar geopotential height. Now, there was a pretty good correlation between ozone and the average 500 millibar geopotential height. Oh, I'd say 5 to 10 years ago. There was some research done on that. There was a pretty good correlation. That correlation has weakened recently. Why that is still somewhat of an unknown. So this graph is not quite as telling as it used to be, but there's still some really good information on here. And the one thing, I like to look at here is the orange bar. Again, that's kind of representing what the average high ozone concentration was at NREL during the summer. And you can see how low it was. It was really low, and that's a welcome piece of news, and no doubt about it, meteorology was a big driver of that. The average maximum temperature during this time period was the 12th hottest of the past 16 years, so certainly a cool summer. And then when we look at the past 16 summers, it was the 3rd wettest. So no doubt about it, meteorology did help us as far as driving down ozone concentrations this past summer. Now, we did see a pretty significant drop off at our big Denver monitors, and I talk about big monitors, NREL, Chatfield, Rocky Flats. Those are the ones that really drive our highest ozone concentrations generally in the Denver area. But we also have some monitors up north in the Fort Collins area and Greeley that we see quite a few exceedances as well. Yes, ozone was pretty low at those monitors as well this past summer because of the meteorology, but the drop down as far as from recent years, not quite as dramatic at those monitors in Fort Collins and Greeley than what we've seen here in Denver over the past couple of years. So the reasons for that are still a bit unknown, but no doubt about it, the lower concentrations this year, meteorology had a big role to play in that. So just to wrap things up here, by recent standards, it was certainly a relatively cool and wet summer, which we always welcome. Wildfire smoke, not a major issue here in 2025 for the Northern Front Range as it was in 2024. We did have some brief smoke episodes in the middle of July and early September, but that is not typically the highest ozone time of year. Usually late July through mid-August is when we see our highest ozone minus wildfire smoke. And there were also no major stratospheric intrusions during this past spring or summer. And as I was just saying, although the highest reading Denver ozone monitors did see that drop off over the past couple of years in maximum values, we did not see quite as big a drop off for our Greeley and Fort Collins monitors. They saw very little to no change in that drop off. So I'm going to wrap it up here. I do say questions at the top of this, but I think it might be more effective if I hand this off to Mike Silverstein, have him do his presentation and maybe do all the questions at once, if that's okay with the commissioners.
Okay, hello everyone. Can you hear me okay? And can you see my slides? Excellent. Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to present this afternoon. I'm Mike Silverstein. I'm the Executive Director of the Regional Air Quality Council. And before I begin, I would just like to acknowledge the work of the division in this past presentation on the monitoring data and meteorology, very, very informative. And also going back to the presentation of the report to the public, and brings back fond memories for me because I was either part of preparing or working with the commission to approve those reports for 20 some years. So that brings back great memories for me. And I'm here now to kind of follow up on the division's presentation to provide some additional perspective on the monitoring data and also the work at the Regional Air Quality Council in its work to reduce emissions and improve our air quality in our region. And so let's see if I could get us to click here through the slides. All right, so this is our non-attainment area, this graphic here. It's a large non-attainment area stretching from Douglas County and to the north to the Wyoming border. And I apologize, I did not also express a welcome to the Board of Health members that are here on the meeting today. And I'm sorry for that omission. And so I hope this presentation is informative also for the Board of Health members who usually aren't involved in this kind of work. And so the Regional Air Quality Council is the lead planning agency for the Denver Metro North Front Range ozone non-attainment area. As the slide says, we have 30 governor-appointed board members that are helpful in our deliberations and development of emission control approaches and planning activities. And so we bring together ideas. That's what we're about at the Regional Air Quality Council. We do analysis and we develop emission control strategies related to specific programs, potentially regulations and plans to address regional ozone problems. And so this work requires defining the problems to address the issues and to analyze for solutions. And so really, that's our mission, to develop solutions to improve our air quality in the Front Range every day. And so at the Regional Air Quality Council, this is just a real busy slide, but it hopefully is helpful in describing what we do at RAC. And so we're involved with research, voluntary, and incentive programs, whether it's through ozone modeling and technical assessments, education, marketing, and outreach, community-based programs and social marketing, micro-mobility programs, anti-idling efforts, auto maintenance and vehicle repair programs. We track the data, we analyze how we're doing. We work with incentivizing the electrification of lawn and garden equipment in the public, commercial, and residential spheres. And we have pushed back into our communities in recent years more than $20 million that we collect, we raise, we get grants and contracts to incentivize and work to improve air quality for citizens, for local governments, for businesses. And these logos here represent the various programs that we run at RAC. And so, again, this $20 million, it's a really important element of the work we do for improving our air quality and helping our region get involved in the individual actions that can improve air quality. And so to kind of expand on the data that the division presented a moment ago, this is how we grab the division's data every month, and this is our end of season report that we keep up on our website. It goes through the end of September, and this shows all of the data by monitoring site, the first through the fourth maximum concentrations. And so this fourth max concentration here in the highlighted area really is the number that counts when we determine how are we doing against the federal standards for ozone. Because the first three values are important for public health, of course, but it's the fourth maximum that is part of the form of the EPA standard that determines whether we're in or out of compliance with federal ozone standards. And then we look at the 3-year average of the fourth maximum concentrations. And this final column here basically says, how are we doing? And so the color coding here basically says if we're orange or if we're in the orange category, we're above the 75 standard still. That's the older EPA standard. And if we're in the green, we're less than the 70 parts per billion standard. And if we're in the yellow, we're in between. We're above the 70 parts per billion standard. And that is, as was mentioned, the controlling standard for public health. And so this hopefully provides excellent information for all of you, all of our stakeholders throughout the year. And what a cool feature we have in this is a ranking or a gauge of smoke impact on the various days. So we have developed with our partners an analytical approach to determine was smoke non-existent? Was it a low probability or a high probability? And we're now working on a medium probability as well of determining was the day really affected by smoke or not. And so when we go through our tables here, and then as I move to the next, the remainder of the monitoring sites, this same presentation of data, we could see that we had very little smoke impact throughout the year. And so all of these data cannot, these high ozone days cannot be attributed to wildfire smoke as a primary reason for our high levels. And it shows we had an excellent year for ozone compared to other years. And this graphic is, I think, really telling, which basically says here are the number of days in each year's going back in time that were above the federal standards at some location, some monitoring location in the non-attainment area. So when we look to 2025, we could see that there were 23 total days above the standard, which when you look at all of the other days throughout time, those are really, really favorable numbers. And the division team, presented some good reasons why we had such a good summer, a turbulent atmosphere. We didn't have those stagnation events. We had lots of precipitation compared to other years and cloud cover and maybe some lower temperatures as well. And so this graphic here is really important. And we only had 6 days above the 75 parts per billion standard, which we haven't seen in a very, very long time. And so what this is also telling us, all the data tables are telling us that we had a year where we did not exceed the 75 parts per billion standard at any of our monitoring sites, which you could call that with reference to the older standard, what's called a clean data year. It doesn't mean that all 3 years in the 3-year average are below the standard, but we've made it for the most recent year to values that are at or below the standard of 75. But of course, we're not at or below the 70 standard, which is the controlling standard for public health. And so these graphics here basically say, well, what does this mean if we're supposed to attain the standard by 2027, as the current requirements require of us? And so we could see that in 2026 now, we have to have some pretty good air quality for the 3-year averages to be at 75 or less, and definitely wonderful air quality if we're going to achieve the 70 standard by the end of next year. So we have a shot for the 75 standard. And so we could see in these values that are in orange, that on the data table for 2026, that we could have some pretty high numbers for these monitoring sites to still be able to show 75 or less. And we need at Chatfield and Evergreen and NREL and Rocky Flats North and Fort Collins West some data that's very similar to this year, but even lower, for the 3-year average to be below the standard. So we're getting closer, but we have a ways to go. And then when we look at the 70 parts per billion, we're pretty far away from measuring a 3-year average at 70 or less. And so this is the kind of press we get with this kind of numbers. And this is from last year. So this is a Denver Post cartoon in the editorial part of their publications that say, hey, we had 40 values. Actually, it turned out to be 41 over the course of the full ozone season. And this is the kind of motivation we have at the RAC for our work. We can't afford to have these kinds of numbers, this poor of air quality, year after year after year. And so we need to continue to make the progress that we hope to make, reduce emissions and improve public health. And this is what we're faced with. We look at population, and vehicle miles traveled. We just have more of us every year, all the time, doing more and more things, driving more. The activities that support this kind of population growth are emission sources for ozone, whether it's lawn and garden equipment or home cleaning products or industrial emissions or our vehicle exhaust. We are faced with a never-ending challenge to gain the emission reductions in the face of growth in our region. And we're also faced with this complex meteorology that's conducive for ozone to build up in our summer months. Many of you have seen these graphics before, and it basically says we're in a basin and we have airflow that just doesn't like to disperse in our hot summer months where we have stagnation, little cloud cover, little thunderstorm activity. And so our region it's conducive to the buildup of pollutants, whether it's in the wintertime, which used to be our problem, or the summertime. We're faced with a carrying capacity that's very, very low for air pollution in our region. And so that means we have work to do. And these are the emission categories that we're trying to gain further reductions. As was mentioned earlier, we've seen great emission reductions due to the programs at the local, state, and federal levels over the last 20 and 30 years. But we still have emissions in our region, and this is the breakdown. And so these are in tons per day for nitrogen oxides and volatile organic compounds. And it just provides a perspective of where are the emissions and gives us directions as to where we should focus our activities so we can gain cost-effective emission reduction and bring these ideas forward. And so our council has adopted its goal of achieving the standards on time. Now, part of that phrase "on time" will be something new to this audience where the deadline will be moving. So I said a few moments ago that we have to be in attainment with the federal standards by 2027. And that's true for both standards at this time. Now, the state will be requesting that EPA downgrade or reclassify the region to a severe classification for the 70 parts per billion standard, that tougher standard. And that then, if approved by EPA, allows for more time to get to compliance. So we're assuming that will happen, that will come true, and that our goals, our planning activities will shift now to achieving the standard and improving public health by the new deadlines. And that new deadline is a 2030 through 2032 period. And we need to start gaining the necessary emission reductions no later than 2030 to begin achieving a 3-year average that will be below the standard of 70 parts per billion. And so how do we do that? Well, we are developing what's called the Control Strategy Blueprint. And that's in front of the Regional Air Quality Council's board for consideration in November. And so what is the blueprint? Are they regulations? No. Is this the next SIP? No, it's not. And what are the problems we're trying to solve? Well, let me talk about that. So the blueprint is a planning exercise versus deciding. So we need to develop strategies and approaches that we can then put into our technical tools, our modeling activities, so we can begin to project attainment in the early 2030s. So we want to, of course, not only model attainment, but achieve attainment at the monitoring site, which is a public health improvement. That's what really the EPA standards are all about. And we have to account for the growth in population and the economic activity along the way. And so we need to look at the emissions, and we need to analyze those emissions and look for measures that can reduce emissions, whether they're regulatory or voluntary. And we need to look at things on a timeline, a realistic timeline for considerations. And so they're not strategies that are, one by one, but it's a comprehensive, which we hope is a strategic approach in looking at packages of strategies and ideas that can achieve the emission reductions by 2030. And of course, we need to engage stakeholders. We've been doing that. We've been doing that at RAC for years now. In other forms, we've rebranded to this blueprint idea. And it's a strategic approach to get there. And whether things are regulations, that will be up to others. The RAC is not a regulatory body. We're advisory. So we will either be recommending rules or we'll be recommending incentive-based funding approaches or voluntary approaches to achieve these necessary emission reductions on time. So we want to aim for success instead of coming back to this commission, this Board of Health, with reports of, hey, we're not making it. We don't know what to do. We've run out of ideas. No, that's not going to be the case. We're working towards success. And so we need to draft these recommendations. We need to look at ozone planning in context of our entire region. What are our responsibilities at RAC? What's the public input? What are the trends at the most polluted sites? What are the emissions that cause ozone? And then we need to look at the strategies. What's already in the pipeline? What's already in either adopted by the commission or other regulatory bodies? What is the division working on? And we need to account for that. And as part of this work is in front of the commission now in what's called the Serious Ozone SIP. And that's scheduled for consideration by the commission next month. And we need to look at what can be done post 2025 and work all of these potential strategies in the context of our blueprint strategic approach. And then we need to develop these strategies for the non-attainment area, provide the information and the evaluation, continue to bring things through our stakeholder process and seek endorsement of the blueprint and the recommendations by the RAC board. And so we're doing this in a phased approach, and we're looking at essentially 3 buckets of strategies. Okay, bucket 1, it's more the immediate strategies that we either are doing now or that are ready to go. So what are off-the-shelf ozone seas and emission reduction programs that the Air Quality Control Commission, for example, could consider in 2026 for application in the short term. So that accounts for those things that are already in the proposal phase or close to that. And then bucket 2 would be, okay, what can we do maybe in the midterm, through 26, through 27, maybe 28 for to gain these strategies. And this is really the heart of some of the blueprint work, some of the new ideas. What are these things that can and should be done over the medium term that could come to fruition by 2030 with their emission reductions? And then what are the longer term things? Some of those on the books rules, for example, or strategies that need way more time to develop so that they can, their emission reductions that are already scheduled have an opportunity to get fully implemented in work. And so those are things that would take, through or up to 2030 to achieve the benefits. And so this is a timeline of where we're at with this blueprint process. And, it goes back in time a little bit. So the slides, shows kind of a history of when we rebranded our work from developing the next SIP, which is in front of the commission now, to a rebranding of the blueprint with a longer horizon for success. And so we're at this October timeframe where it's going into the RAC board for its review, for its presentation and adoption and endorsement by the RAC board in early November. And then if endorsed, presentation to the Air Quality Control Commission in the November timeframe. And so that concludes my presentation. I hope I didn't kick us over into public comment, but I'm happy to talk about this and answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mike, and Scott and William as well. This was quite a complete presentation, and I appreciated it. I'm sure everyone else does as well. Commissioners, are there any questions for these three guys? Commissioner Reeder.
Thank you. I was just curious. Thanks for the great presentation by both of you, or all of you. And thinking about the 3-year 24 to 26 period, I guess, Mike, you had the charts with 24, 25, and what 26 has to be. But we heard from the division about the smoke impacts in 2024, and you had noted sort of the smoke impacts or lack of smoke impacts in 25. I guess I'm wondering if you had a smoke adjusted 2024. I know it's a lot of work to do exceptional events and stuff, but if you looked at 24 and the days that were smoke impacted and sort of said, if we were to do all of this, how much do those 2024 numbers drop, and how might that help a 24 to through 26 averaging period?
Well, if I may, thank you for the question. Our presentation doesn't have that data. We did drop off what the division has labeled as flagged days. Those are days that potentially could be deemed exceptional or smoke impacted or stratospheric ozone impacted. And they did reduce values somewhat, especially in the month of July of 2024. But they weren't enough to dramatically lower the number of exceedances or the concentrations. But there was a marked effect that could be noted between the times where we could visually see there wasn't smoke, and then the smoke impacted days in the middle of summer. But to drop those days off, those would have to be officially classified as exceptional events. The division would need to prepare that analysis and then present that information to EPA for consideration. But it wouldn't have dramatically helped us in the 3-year average. It would have reduced the numbers though.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Thomas.
Yeah, I guess this question would be for all three of the gentlemen. Thank you again for the summary. I wasn't able to stay on top of it as much as here, so this is a really good recap. But the presence of smoke, wildfire smoke, and its impacts on regional ozone. Is it necessarily that smoke always results in higher incremental ozone concentrations? Or is it like wildfire smoke that might have high PM? Does it always have high NOx? Is it the precursors that really confound the ability to do the analysis of smoke impacted versus not smoke impacted?
I can take this one. Thank you, Commissioner Thomas, for that question. Yeah, smoke, it's nothing straightforward when it comes to the relationship between smoke and ozone. It does act as a precursor, but at times, as Will, I think, alluded to during his presentation, it can actually act as a shield if there's enough smoke in the atmosphere to decrease the amount of incoming ultraviolet radiation. So at times, if we have very, very thick smoke aloft, it can actually reduce ozone concentrations. Now, at times, that acts as a precursor, but the amount of enhancement to ozone can depend also on how aged that smoke is. So sometimes we'll get smoke coming in from the western slope, it'll be a day old, and we'll see some increase in ozone concentrations, but not as dramatic as, say, some smoke that's been aged 2 to 3 days that's come in from California, the Pacific Northwest, and we'll see much bigger spikes in ozone. So it's a very complicated situation. It's not straightforward when we're talking about smoke and ozone.
Yeah, but your answer was straightforward, so I appreciate that, Scott. And then my other second question and last question could be going back to William's presentation, and for the South Front Range, so Manitou and Colorado Springs. I don't know if he's still on the line or not.
Yeah, Will might have had to jump off. I could try to answer a question though.
There was that really big dip in Colorado Springs in the mid 2010s. I'm just curious if you recall, like, I mean, we've seen big dips in the Front Range, but not anything like what we saw in that 2015-ish time frame. Just curious if you remember digging deeper into that and if there was any explanation.
Yeah, Commissioner Thomas, thank you for that question. I would have to dig into it a little bit deeper, but the one thing we do see with the Colorado Springs monitors is when they're high, it's generally driven by wildfire smoke or stratospheric intrusions. So my speculation, and again, I would like to look at it a little closer, during that time period, maybe not as much smoke around the Pikes Peak area, maybe not as many stratospheric intrusions. But again, I would have to look at that a little closer.
Yeah, no problem. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, before Commissioner Rudolph, I wanted to extend an invitation for the Board of Health to ask questions as well. I didn't mean to ignore y'all. You're here, and we would sure appreciate your input if you have any. So, Commissioner Rudolph, go ahead.
Thank you, and thanks to all three of you for the presentation. This was really very interesting and informative, and I very much appreciate the time you've all taken to put together these slide decks and try to explain this to us. Scott, this is a question for you, and this goes back to your slide 17. The term geopotential height, could you tell those of us who don't know what that is, what is that?
Sure. Thank you, Commissioner Rudolph. It's basically just the height that's been normalized of the 500 millibar level above the surface of the Earth. So generally, when we see larger numbers, 500 millibar heights, it generally means we have a large dome of high pressure overhead. And usually with upper level high pressure systems, it's hotter and it's drier. Now, that's not always the case. And you may notice on that slide that this past summer, that number was kind of reasonably high compared to other years. But one thing we do sometimes see with these upper level highs, when we have a strong monsoon, a lot of times we'll see a large ridge of high pressure overhead and moisture moving into lower levels. And actually a surface low will form pulling in Gulf moisture, Gulf of Mexico moisture, and we'll see, despite the fact high 500 millibar geopotential heights, a lot of shower and thunderstorm activity. So I think that the 500 millibar height being relatively high this summer was driven by that. And I think the monsoonal flow really tempered those ozone concentrations.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Blankenship.
Thank you, John. I have a question for Mr. Silverstein. Can you hear me? Yeah, I'm
you're
seeing
good.
some nods, heads. Okay, great. Thank you. I think most obviously ozone reduction, the primary motivation is to improve health. But when I see the cartoon and I hear some of the dialogue, it's also saying to me that some of that motivation is economic impacts slash economic development, and economic development equals growth. And growth, I think, as we know it, and even as one of the slides showed, that equals increase emissions, which we have a strong, belief and understanding that those emissions are precursors to ozone. And given the geographic attributes of the Front Range, it seems like to me that we not only need to think way out of the box, we need to act way out of the box, because to continue to do what we've been doing doesn't seem to really do much towards solving the problem. Now, I was just wondering what your thoughts are in that respect, and how your blueprint really looks at different strategies, and are they far enough out of the box to actually effect some real change in our air quality?
Well, thank you for the question, Commissioner. And we hope that our blueprint, achieves that ultimate goal. We have a very complex region, and as you said, we have the growth in commercial, residential, vehicle activity, and we also have an air quality problem. And air quality is driven by those emissions from all of our activities. Of course, we have transport of pollutants to our region from outside. We have wildfire impacts. We have natural sources. We try to document and account for all of that. But we could see that it's when you look at the monitoring data from the other sites in Colorado, they don't have an ozone problem, and primarily because there's not that level of activity. So background and transport isn't causing the exceedances. Of course, it's contributing to the baseline amounts, but it's our activities that push us over the top. So we're looking at, through our blueprint approach, a strategic way of evaluating strategies that are accounting for the growth in activities, but also the emission reductions that are already programmed, the potential relaxation of strategies under the federal EPA and the Trump administration to back off strategies that we're counting on. And so that will just make our problem long-term even more challenging. And so we're looking at the full array of strategies, whether it's from vehicle exhaust or mobile sources activity, off-road and non-road equipment, a big category, kind of an under-controlled sector, construction, airports, events, those large recreation activities that draw us all to those things. Everything in our daily lives contributes to the emissions that cause ozone. So we're looking with all of our stakeholders and our processes of what can we do to reduce emissions. That's really the only way I know to improve air quality, is reduce emissions. And so that's what we're up to at RAC, is to try to, with our partners, with the agencies that we work with, come up with realistic approaches, out of the box approaches that we haven't touched on yet, maybe looking back in time to strategies that may have been not selected for various reasons, and reevaluating that to determine a path forward.
Yeah, unfortunately, it seems like in our society, most of the time it takes some sort of extreme events or consequences to motivate us to change our behavior. And it appears to me, at least, that behavioral change is probably a component of actually finding some success in these endeavors. So I appreciate your work, but we've all got a really very big challenge to really to be able to start to affect some noticeable and meaningful change.
And if I might add finally that we hope at the RAC we can approach the commission on a regular basis to provide a status report of how we're doing. We come to you once a year in this presentation, and I'm grateful for that opportunity. But because our blueprint envisions, activities that are ongoing and that we will be bringing forward ideas, we want to present that to the Air Quality Control Commission on a regular basis so that you're aware of what we're doing and might be in a position to consider strategy approaches that need the Air Commission's consideration and endorsement. So that's kind of in our long range plans with the blueprint.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Anyone else? Commissioners, board members? Okay, we will move on. Our next agenda item is public comment. And the public is invited to provide oral public comment on any air pollution issue of their choosing, whether it is on our agenda or not. The commission may not take action on issues discussed during this general public comment period. Such matters may be scheduled for further discussion or action at a later date. Spoken comments provided during this time and written comments submitted in advance will be incorporated into rulemaking records and may be referenced during the hearings in the coming days. The session may end early if all commenters that are registered and in attendance have had an opportunity to speak. I will call on names in the order shown on the screen. You may then unmute to speak or press *6 if you're on the phone. If you have any technical difficulties, please send a chat to Jenny or raise your hand by using the raise hand function or by pushing *9 if you're on the phone. I ask that everyone please stay on time. Each person will receive 3 minutes to speak in order to accommodate everyone who signed up to speak. We will start now with Renee Chacon, and you have 3 minutes, council member. Renee, are you with us? Well, we can move on to Emily Bear from the town of Erie. Circle back to Renee.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Emily.
Great, thanks. Good evening, commissioners. My name is Emily Bear. I'm a member of the Erie Town Council. Thank you for taking time for public comments today. I'm here to talk about the upcoming Regulation 7 rulemaking, which will reduce methane emissions from oil and gas well sites across the state. The town of Erie takes climate change very seriously. We have set short-term emissions reductions goals that we plan to achieve by the end of this year. We're working to move our energy supply to renewable sources. We're collaborating with our utilities to replace gas-powered equipment. We are doing our part to address the climate crisis. However, in the face of increasing threats from an unstable climate, Erie needs to see action from the state and every Colorado entity. Businesses, governments, and private individuals must all make commitments to reducing the gases that cause dangerously hot summers, explosive wildfires, and crippling drought. Methane in particular causes fast-paced heating. It traps 120 times as much heat as carbon dioxide. Methane from the fracking boom of the last 2 decades has been linked to a rapid increase in climate warming over the same period. Now, methane emissions from human activities continue to increase around the world. Anything we can do now to reduce emissions of this devastating greenhouse gas will make all Coloradans safer and healthier over the coming decades. In Erie, we experienced the impacts of being located on the front lines of that fracking boom, from health impacts including nausea, nosebleeds, and asthma, to climate impacts including poor air quality, increasing heat, drought, and floods. To prevent climate crisis, we must take action on methane emissions now. I urge you to adopt a strong Regulation 7 without any further delay on the control measures that the APCD has proposed. The climate will not wait just because political winds have shifted. And it is more important now than ever for the state of Colorado to take action to prevent catastrophe. Thank you.
Thank you. Matt Scherer, please, from Eagle County.
Yes, thank you. Sound check. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Terrific. Thank you. Good evening, commissioners. Thank you for your time this evening and for the opportunity to share my comments on the GEM 2 State Managed Fund for Industrial Greenhouse Gas Emitters. I am Eagle County Commissioner Matt Scherer. The Air Pollution Control Division recently announced that it is working towards a rulemaking request for a state-managed fund for the GEM 2 facilities. These facilities are the largest industrial emitters of greenhouse gases in the state of Colorado. Eagle County hosts one of the facilities that is regulated under this rule, the American Gypsum Plant in Gypsum. Don't ask me who got the name first. Although it is early in the process for the GEM 2 state-managed fund, I wanted to bring this issue to the attention of this commission sooner than later because it has significant effects on Colorado's ability to meet its 2030 emissions reductions goals. I'm concerned that the fund may displace and delay needed reductions from Colorado's biggest greenhouse gas emitters. The fund's purpose is unclear. An inexpensive carbon trading market already exists to alleviate costs for these facilities. The first round of carbon credits sold in this market for just $25 this year, making trading a highly affordable option for facilities to meet their emissions goals. The trading market, unlike a state-managed fund, ensures that emissions reductions are still happening on time. We cannot delay meeting Colorado's climate pollution goals. Climate change continues to deepen our state's drought and increase our high heat days. In Eagle County, we face constant threats from longer, more aggressive fire seasons. We had another 6,000-acre fire this year in Eagle County. We've already taken significant steps to respond to climate change. But we local governments cannot take on this burden alone, and we look to this commission to ensure that the industrial and manufacturing sector will also take action to achieve emissions reductions. So as the GEM 2 State Managed Fund rulemaking process unfolds, I ask this commission to consider seriously whether such a mechanism is needed. We can no longer afford to wait to reduce greenhouse gas pollution, and all of Colorado must contribute to the effort. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Matthew Yeager. Matthew? How about Velma Campbell? I see you. Go
Yes,
ahead,
thank
Velma.
you. Hello. Thank you, commissioners, for the opportunity to speak to you this evening. I am Velma Campbell from Pueblo, Colorado. I'm a medical doctor specializing in public health, particularly occupational and environmental health sciences. I'm commenting this evening on the pending rulemaking in December, presumably regarding landfill methane emissions. Your deliberations are crucial to the development of rules that will advance the level of knowledge about landfill emissions and increase protection of public health and the environment, including the climate. It is a principle of public health that data is key to effective actions. And for that reason, I urge the Commission to require the use of advanced monitoring technologies to reduce the significant information gaps regarding levels of methane from landfills. Monitoring for other substances is not yet within these rules, but establishing quality procedures could make it easier to set up new programs if and when they're needed. We all know methane is a very potent driver of climate change, so capturing and controlling it is essential to reducing the impact of landfills on public health and climate. Here in Pueblo, the Southside landfill is one of the top sources of greenhouse gases, according to EPA's GHG reporting system. Housing in our community is moving closer to the landfill with its methane flaring system. In other Colorado communities, there are landfills much closer to residential areas with correspondingly greater health impacts. Methane and CO2 with other emissions are ozone precursors, which is a respiratory hazard for people, as are other landfill pollutants not in these rules. Even Pueblo, long thought to be low in ozone hazard, has had alerts a few miles from the landfill in an area that is not highly industrial. Published studies have shown adverse health effects in people living near municipal landfills, some due to emissions other than methane, but flares of methane, if not properly maintained and controlled, can result in increased air pollution, making it essential that the new regulations require monitoring at fence lines as well as at flares and control of emissions from any flares that are allowed, including preferably closed flares with air pollution controls. It may be necessary in future to develop funding assistance for communities that may not have the capacity to develop these programs, but they are essential. Non-flaring measures should also be implemented to reduce emissions more diffusely. The rules should not create a market for landfill gas, which could be a disincentive to measures that ultimately would reduce production of methane and other gases. These rules have the potential for a significant role in progress in greenhouse gas reduction, and I thank you for your work upon them.
Well, thank you, Dr. Campbell. Olivia Alves. Olivia,
Hi, thank you.
go ahead.
Thank you, Commissioner. My name is Olivia Alves, and I'm a senior associate at RMI, the Rocky Mountain Institute, an independent, nonpartisan, and nonprofit working to secure a clean energy future for all and cut methane pollution. I appreciate the chance to speak today in support of Regulation Number 31 to establish methane emission reduction requirements for municipal solid waste landfills. As buried food scraps and organic waste break down beneath the landfill surface, they generate methane, a potent greenhouse gas with 80 times the heat trapping power of carbon dioxide over the near term. Because of its short atmospheric life, cutting methane today is one of the most effective ways to slow warming in our lifetime. When landfill methane is released, along with it are multiple hazardous air pollutants, including toxic forever chemicals and known carcinogens like benzene and vinyl chloride. Landfill gas also contributes to regional ozone pollution, which is of particular concern given that parts of the Front Range are in severe ozone non-attainment, and as our presentation showed. When it comes to landfill methane, there are clear solutions that unlock major local benefits. Colorado's Regulation Number 31 will address major sources of methane within the state and improve air quality to protect communities and improve public health. Communities near landfills bear the brunt of this pollution. Colorado has the opportunity to lead, and we support the division's proposed measures, especially earlier gas collection, more efficient destruction devices, better cover materials, and remote monitoring. These practical solutions that have been implemented in several other states and by many landfill operators. In fact, around 300 landfills nationwide are already covered by stronger state level requirements. For example, Michigan requires landfills to put in gas collection systems in every new cell and has some of the lowest tipping fees in the country. These measures are also cost effective. Analysis show that reducing landfill methane pollution typically costs less than $10 per ton, with public benefits that far exceed any upfront costs. The division estimates the rule could avoid more than $1 billion in climate damages while delivering public health benefits, sustaining local jobs, and boosting energy production. Compliance delays for landfills put communities and our planet at risk. For these reasons, we urge the Commission to swiftly adopt the vital protections in Regulation Number 31 at the hearing in December. The Commission should ensure people living near landfills are protected from pollution and reject proposals to delay compliance timelines. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Catherine Blovelt, please. Catherine?
Thank you. Here I am in my car with my 7.5-year-old in the back. because that's the time of day. And I'm the head of Full Circle Future. We work with people who live near landfills and experience their health impacts. And we work across the country and in Colorado on solutions and strategies, right, to mitigate that pollution. So really grateful. I've been following the commission's work for a while now. And again, as you talk about ozone formation, landfills and the methane they emit is a relevant topic. Landfills emit VOCs. That's the key to ozone formation. But here tonight, I signed up just to highlight really quickly some important, timely news from outside Colorado. Just 2 weeks ago, the California Air Resources Board, or CARB, released proposed amendments to its landfill methane regulation, and they're going to vote on it next month at their November 20th meeting. So here's what's worth remembering. California first adopted many of the very same measures you're looking at in Reg 31. Okay, same measures, but they adopted them back 15 years ago when the Jersey Shore was popular, when Netflix was mailing DVDs, right? So that's one of our largest landfill sectors, waste sectors in the country. CARB required way back then in 2010, smaller landfills to install gas collection systems. They phased out open flares in favor of enclosed high efficiency combustion. In other words, policies you guys are considering, again, landfills are contributing to ozone formation and much worse, frankly, they've already been proven for more than a decade in one of the largest waste sectors in the country. But that's not all. We all know Oregon, Washington, they have mountains, they have a lot of rural landfills. They have also adopted those similar requirements too. So that's just good information. Back to CARB, they, which is kind of nice to see, they're following in the direction of Colorado in the sense that they're also looking at adopting satellite monitoring results, right? Like really getting at those leaks quicker and earlier gas collection. CARB does go farther than your proposed Reg 31 in some respects. Like, for example, they'd eliminate a lot of the exemptions that landfills use to just not monitor for methane leaks at all. So CARB simply says, hey, if you can't send a human being to that hard to reach area, please monitor using a remote technology. So that's a cool improvement. And I'm just really grateful for the diligence you folks are providing tonight and your diligence you show towards preventing pollution.
Thank you. I think we can circle back to to Renee Chacon, if you're here. Renee? Is Renee the only one we missed? Jenny, you keeping score?
And Matthew Yeager.
Okay. Matthew Yeager, are you here? Is there anyone else online here that would like to make public comment? I think we have time for some more. You just raise your hand or star 9, I believe, if you're on the phone. Well, I don't see anyone. So, commissioners, any words of wisdom for us or for the Board of Health? I'm sure they need some. Commissioners? Board members, you might have some words of wisdom for us, and I'm not sure we could stand that, but
I'm
Okay,
happy
well.
to speak. No, I appreciate all the public comments this afternoon, and especially the comments related to some of the studies around methane and its effect on health. So I am not personally familiar as much with the research, so but it's good to know that there are members in the community who are familiar with it.
We certainly have a well-informed public, at least the ones that come to our meetings and give comments. So we do appreciate that as always. If there's no other comments, we can adjourn this meeting. It is 5:32 in the afternoon, and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.
See y'all tomorrow.
Thank you.
See you on
Thanks,
the morning,
everybody.
commissioners. Thank you.